But, right, so it can only be understood as the result of meditative practice. But it is also, there's a sense in which it's not phenomenological, because in all the phenomenological constructs that we see in the West, there's an emphasis on the constitution of phenomena for a subject. Right? Now, Nibbana is non-causal and non-constitutive, in the sense that it has nothing to do with the conditional relations of all the various physical and phenomenal properties in the world. Okay? Now, it is not a ground for these things. Okay? And it's not something that we need in order to understand the changes. Okay? It's not constitutive or causal in that way. It's not that which terminates the causal regress of the existence of things in the world, and it is not the ground in virtue of which we are able to comprehend change. It's nothing like that. Okay? So these phenomenological structures, they're intentional in the sense that they're world-oriented. Okay? However, there is a certain movement in recent phenomenology, especially in the phenomenology of embodiment, that is what it's like to live in a body, okay? That tries to give a non-intentional account of our experience, okay? That is a non-world-oriented account of our embodiment. And this could be a way, and I think there's a philosopher of mind who implicitly takes advantage of this, and I'll talk about that in a minute, to phenomenologize Nibbana. And so the way we do this is the following, right? There's an operative distinction between what we might call reflective and pre-reflective consciousness, okay? And what that is, to quote Professor Thompson, pre-reflective experience is logically prior to reflection, for reflection presupposes something to reflect upon, and it is temporally prior to reflection, for what one reflects upon is hitherto unreflected experience. So this helps us phenomenologize, I'll get it eventually, Nibbana, because it explicates a fundamental layer of our experience, which gains its essential quality by not referring to some representational construct of the world, but as a ground for which that happens. Okay, so there's a possibility there, but I will fully flesh that out in a more analytical framework when I talk about the philosophy of mind later. So if you can just sort of bracket that, I'm just going to put it over here. That'll be very helpful. Thanks. Okay, so. By now, I hope to have substantiated the first two premises, which is that all of Dhamma is in pursuit of Nibbanic realization, and that Nibbana is not a concept easily appropriated to Western thought. I hope so. So now we got to, I want, yes?
I'm sorry. You're trying to make, you're saying that Nibbana exists.
How do you mean existence? Do you mean as that which can be predicated of a universal quantifier? If so, no.
I'm trying not to get caught in the paradoxes. I seem to be
it's real. How's that?
Phenomenology doesn't, as far as I know, I don't know much about it, doesn't make existence claims. They don't tend...
Not in the metaphysically substantial sense, no.
But, okay, in that sense, is Buddha making a claim about Nibbana? Is he saying that this thing exists? Because
he would say it's real. He would say that it's real. He wouldn't say that it exists, because existence, I think, implies a sort of logical architecture that isn't what he's on about, right? Existence is samsara, conditional world. Nibbana is unconditioned. Therefore, to talk about existence is to sort of talk about other things that exist.
Okay, so this is exactly why you're drawing this phenomenological thing into it, right?
Exactly.
So you want to get us in that framework. Okay.
So in order to talk, yes?
Sorry, just kind of continuing that thread, what do we make of the fact that, obviously just by virtue of the fact that we're talking about it, the unconditioned world can directly influence the conditioned world?
What do you mean by directly influence?
Well, at least it's accessible to the...
It can be experienced.
Yeah.
Yes.
But at one point that experience can be brought back, can be remembered, can be discussed.
Yep, it can. Huge subtle difficulties there. I really want to talk about them with you. Can we do it after?
Sure.
Is that okay? Like these are substantial and interesting ideas, but like I really want to finish. Because like there's a conclusion and it wraps up nicely, and I'm going to be like 2/3 of the way through, and I was going to be like, see ya. So this was actually where I wanted to take the break. So we're just going to keep on going. So in order to substantiate the third premise, which basically takes the first two premises in conjunction and as the antecedent of a conditional and generates as the consequent the disconnect, the problem, right? If Nibbana is essentially, if all the individual elements of Buddhism are to be authentically understood with regards only to Nibbana, and Nibbana is essentially opaque to Western models, then Western models, insofar as they're trying to appropriate individual elements of the Buddha, are missing something essential. Right? So in order to sort of substantiate that conditional, I want to just look at three models. And for all of you who are much more educated in the subtleties of these models, you will be deeply disappointed because they are hopelessly simplistic, and I just don't have the space, because, especially with this first model of psychotherapy, because this is a huge area of convergence with Buddhism. Like there's massive volumes of literature, right? And to even talk about that in a substantial way is, you know, impossible. So I'm just trying to, from the point of view of my sort of puritanical take on the Buddha's teaching, just sort of dip out into these Western models and sort of be like, yep, this is really good, but look at this problem. And this is good, but look at this problem. And hopefully that will just be enough to sort of keep on trucking towards the end. So meditation, in some form or another, patipati, that's the practical path, has been helpful in supplementing the therapeutic process in areas like MBSR. However, a lot of this work has simply been boring terms like mindfulness and redefining them in different ways. And trying to understand what this is doing and whether or not it can be authentically called Buddhist is an important question, right? So I'd say that if a person's using meditation in a therapeutic context, it's pretty certain they're not going to be like too close to Nibbana, right? Like that's not a pejorative statement, that's just the fact, right? And the goal of Buddhism is not to correct pathological or deviant behavior, as often is the case in therapy. It's to transcend conditioned existence, right? Slightly different areas of departure and conclusion there, right? Now there is overlap. I think that, as I said at the beginning, like the mutual influence is important, but here I just want to emphasize the point where there's difference. So I think the nature of pathological behavior patterns often fly in the face of sila. So for the purposes of this sort of short little foray, I wanted to think about the extent to which we can understand therapy, the therapeutic process, as an attempt to get people to establish their sila. I think that's a good way of giving the benefit of the doubt to the therapeutic process as a means of converging with Buddhism very intimately. So in that sense, you know, learning to be more peaceful in our communication with others, coming out of violent or abusive behavior, and you know, getting out of dangerous and harmful trades. These are all those are the three factors of sila, right? And these are all important to get established in these, but all of these must be already transcended before meditation can actually lead you along the path, right? The three factors of right speech, right action, and right livelihood, those have to be like pretty well established before you can properly take advantage of the meditative elements of the path. We'll be more specific. Now, I think this idea of using therapy as a tool to systematically establish sila is an amazing idea because, you know, therapy is a systematic process, and if you look in the Buddhist teaching, there's no real systematic approach to sila like there is for meditating in the samadhi and the panna factors. It's kind of just like, just do these things, and then after that, here's some method for meditating, right? So if we can use Western psychology as a means to bring a systematic method to sila, that's a really interesting and I think awesome idea, right? So in that sense, we have a really, I think, vital point of convergence here. But, and to that point, I just want to make the caveat that, you know, just because a being cannot realistically get you Nibbana here and now, like for instance, all of us, I think it's fair to say that not all of us are like on the doorstep of like realization to the ending of all misery. You know, that doesn't mean that certain people aren't on the path and making small steps in their own way, right? So with that said, the tension that I see is this. Okay, the bringing of systematic methodology to sila is a double-edged sword. You know, there's a reason that no systematic method for sila was given by the Buddha. And I think that in the same way as it was for the samadhi and the panya, the concentration and the wisdom. And I think this is important because in order to make proper steps along the path, that sort of just do it attitude about morality is really important. There's a certain amount of autonomy and control and habituation of character, to borrow the virtue ethic jargon.